video is all about learning how to read the environment so that your boat crew can safely and efficiently navigate along your chosen route in your canoe. Hey, real quick, right before we jump into this video, if you'd do me a huge favor and hit that like button. Also, thank you for subscribing to this channel. If you'd like to be notified of future videos, please hit that bell icon. Have a great day and enjoy this video. So when it comes to reading the environment, we need to look at two things: the wind, and then also you need to look for obstacles in the water. So let's talk about each of those individually with a little bit more detail. First, let's look at the wind. So what are some indicators of wind direction and strength? Well, first, you can look at the water itself. Are there waves on the water? If the water has waves, are they small or are they large? And maybe as large as, are they capping or have white caps? So they're folding over on top of themselves, like being at the surf in the ocean, but you're out on a large body of water with strong wind. What direction are the waves coming at relative to the path that you would like to travel? Because that will affect your boat direction and what paddle stroke that you need to employ as a captain. You can also look at the trees and see if there's wind in the tops of the trees and maybe what direction the tree tops are blowing in. And you could also look at the clouds. So the clouds would offer a high level of indicators of wind direction, but that is not necessarily which direction the wind is affecting your boat down below on the water. Okay. And then also, what is the boat telling you? If the boat is constantly want to be pointed to the right, then that's an indicator of which direction the wind is blowing. All right, so some strategies for managing the wind. Well, first, a good strategy, if you can, is to get out of the wind. So that means you would stay on the leeward side or the downwind side of the terrain. Being on the downward or leeward side of the terrain means that you are able to employ less effort to get from A to B. Conversely, if you're on the windward side or the upwind side of an object or an island or trees or the terrain, then you'll be constantly in the wind, and that will cause you to have to expend more effort to go the same place. Hey, I want to take a second and introduce you to something that I really need you to remember. If you can, try to paddle on the leeward side of the terrain, meaning try and paddle out of the wind. And to show you a worst case scenario why, let's take a look at a crew paddling up Thomas Lake. So this is a map of Thomas Lake. It is oriented track up, which is the track is the direction the crew is headed. North would be to the more or less 10 o'clock position on this map. And I'm going to put some waves on the map here to show you areas that are downwind of the terrain. And the waves are on parts of the lake that I would expect there to be the highest waves with the greatest effect of the wind. The areas that are blue, meaning that to me would be calmer water on the lake and water that would be preferable to be paddling in. Let's take a look at this crew paddling up this lake. Now, if you'll notice, the wind is blowing generally from left to right. And now this last boat crew is going to roll their canoe over in the water. And as you'll notice, as soon as it rolls over in the water, it'll turn broadside of the wind and start drifting with the wind towards shore. And this is why the navigators and captains need to keep up with all the boats in their crew, because it'll take a minute for the other two boats to realize that their last boat in their crew has rolled over and they need help. And so by the time the other two boat crews arrive at their stricken boat crew, you notice that they've drifted quite a ways towards the shore. And this is the part that I want you to remember. If this boat crew is unable to right their boat and get back in their boat and effectively paddle away from shore, the danger is they will end up on shore where there will likely be rocks and deep water and vegetation that will prevent the boat crew from getting up onto shore, unloading the boat, and just fixing their situation. This means they and their boat are going to be bashed up against the shore and unable to get out of the water. And this is not a good situation to be in. The participants could get hurt, the canoe could get damaged, and it will just be exponentially more difficult to fix their situation. So I went through all of this to show you a great reason why you want to paddle away from the downwind shoreline. In other words, you want to paddle on the leeward side of the shore because it's not only easier to paddle in calm water, but also in the unlikely situation of rolling your canoe over, you will have more time to right yourself and get back underway. So with respect to time and distance, the wind direction, and where you're headed, consider paddling on the leeward side of the shore in calmer water. Now, if you're out on Thomas Lake for real, you will notice that Thomas Lake is very big. And I have sped up these events, like the drift and the wind, just to use all of this as an illustration. So, with that, let's continue on with our video. If you have to stay in the wind, then if it makes sense with respect to where you're going and depending on your canoe's load balance, it will be easier to paddle directly into or with the wind. So let me explain that. If your canoe's load is balanced forward, meaning the canoe leans slightly forward because there's more weight in the front of the canoe than the back, then in this situation, it's easier to paddle directly into the wind. And the opposite is true. If your canoe's load is balanced slightly aft, then it is easier to paddle with the wind. Think of it like this. Your canoe will have a natural tendency to pivot around the part of the canoe that sits deepest in the water. Like a weather vane, the part of the canoe that is sitting up higher out of the water catches the wind like a sail. And of course, also remember that when your canoe is broadside to the wind or perpendicular to the wind, that's going to have the most effect on your boat and which stroke that you have to employ and how efficiently you can get from A to B in the wind. So this all comes down to reading the wind and then feeling what your boat is doing and then employing the correct stroke as the captain and as the lookout as a team and maybe your navigator to counteract the effect of the wind on your boat. Okay, the second thing we need to look at are obstacles on the water. So obstacles on the water can be a variety of different things. Could be a tree, a rock, could be shallow water, could be considered an obstacle. And these are things that you may or may not see on the water's surface. But let's talk about this for just a minute. So if you can see a tree sticking up out of the water, obviously you can see it. But sometimes trees are directly under the water or barely on top of the water. So your lookout needs to be observant to look for trees that your canoe could run across and then get you stuck. Rocks are like trees in that they could be visible above the water, or they could be below the water, or just above the water. Okay? Now, you can also easily get stuck or high-centered on top of a rock. And if this happens out in the middle of a lake, or a tree for that matter, then you are grounded. And you will not be able to get back off the object, usually without having to get out of the boat and unload the boat so you can push it off. Now, the important thing here that I want you to remember is the lookout needs, and the captain, but the lookout needs to be looking for differences in water texture, meaning what does the surface of the water look like, and are there any differences in the water texture? So for example, if the water is calm, but there's a slight breeze, and so then there are what looks like currents against something, well, that could be a rock that's just directly under the water, or a tree that's having to be moved around that object. If you have an object that is sticking up above the water, okay, maybe you have whitecaps crashing against that obstacle. So maybe you're in water that has waves, and now all of a sudden there's calm water. So you're looking for any differences in water texture. Usually differences in water texture mean there's an object under the water, or the bottom of the lake is up close to the surface of the water. Okay, so those are important things to be aware of. So for example, you could have an island, okay, or the shore for that matter, or an island between, some water between an island and the shore. So you could just automatically expect that water depth to be shallow. Another thing that you need to remember is you don't want to paddle close to shore. And you definitely don't want to paddle close to shore going at full speed. You want to slow down and take your time. Because if you run aground, you could easily get that object stuck up under your canoe, and then usually your only recourse is to get out of the canoe and push the canoe off and then get back in the canoe. To close, remember when reading the environment, we're looking at the wind and its effect on the canoe. And we're looking for differences in water texture. Those differences in water texture will give us clues as to maybe if there's an obstacle under the water or the water depth is about to change. Remember to paddle on the calm side of the water whenever possible, so you can stay away from the downwind side of the shoreline. And then slow down and don't cut corners when you're close to shore. And that concludes this video. Have a blessed day. Hey, I really hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you'd like to support this channel, remember, please subscribe to this channel, tell your friends about it. Thanks for hitting that like button. Everything here is free. I want to give back to the community. I want to give to you everything here for free. I've been out in the outdoors for a long, long time, and it's great that I can be able to give all this information to you. That is what's most important to me. If you would like to give back, I do have a GoFundMe page set up, and you can follow the link. And if you'd like to, if you're a youth with your parents' support, I would gladly accept your donations. Thank you, and have a blessed day.